Hey everyone, we are live. We're here in the upper gallery of the Hoboken Historical Museum, and you're tuning in for another episode of Hoboken Talks. We've been running this show, I don't know, seems like a while, but we really enjoy doing it, and we're glad you're tuning in. You can, since you're watching live, you're probably on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, and please let other people know that you can tune in. Again, it's Hoboken Talks here from the Hoboken Historical Museum. Tonight, we have a very special guest, but again, a shout out for so many people who have contributed to the program. We've had Stu Ciccarello, Michael Turner, Paul Drexel, Frank Hanovan, Barbara Moriello, Irene Sobel of Corman, and tonight is no exception. So adding to the great guests that we've had, tonight we'll be introducing Jeffrey Train, who's sitting next to me. And again, my name's Bob Foster. I work with the Hoboken Historical Museum. A shout out to Rand Hoppe, our engineer, and we're so glad that you're tuning in. So coming up on the screen is myself, Bob Foster in the red cap, and there's Jeffrey Train with the very distinctive hat and the distinctive glasses and the shirt. Beautiful, nice design to that shirt. Welcome, Jeffrey.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Okay. So, generally this show focuses on residents who've been here forever. Many times they're born and raised. Somehow I think you're a newer resident, so just tell us a little bit about your background and how you got here.
Sure, thanks. So I have called Hoboken my home since 2008, and so absolutely, I guess I'm new here, but it's really become my home over the last 15 years or so. And the reason that we've been talking is because I have fallen in love with birds, in particular the Hoboken birds. And one of the things that I love to talk about is how we have so many feathered neighbors in our neighborhood. And so by talking to you, also maybe hearing from people's stories out there about birds, we can kind of connect a little bit and share how we share that community with our feathered friends.
Right. It is the primary reason we invited you on. We know you have a lot of interest, but, birding is our topic. And so I don't really know too much about birding. So someone who's like a professional who studies is what? An ornithologist?
Yep, ornithologist.
And they're probably paid for their services. And you are different.
Sure.
You are, what do you call yourself?
I guess a bird lover. There's the word birder, which people throw around. They'll ask me that question, are you a birder? What's the difference between birding and a birder? And really what I say is, so I am not an expert. I am not an ornithologist. I don't get paid to study birds, but I am in the field. And the beautiful thing about birding is that when people fall in love with birds, there's something called a spark, which, I can tell you a little bit about my spark bird. It's a Hoboken.
Do it. Tell us the spark.
So my spark bird is very Hoboken-centric. It was during a turkey trot. My wife was running a 5K here in Hoboken. It's coming up in the next couple of weeks. And I happened to be on crutches at the time. And my son and I, Otis, we were standing, right near Pier A. And all of a sudden, on one of the sycamore trees, a red-tailed hawk flies down, lands on a branch, and we're kind of in awe, looking up, 10 feet away at this bird. And he's looking at the ground, and all of a sudden, he drops down, grabs a mouse, flies back up to the limb, and eats it in front of us, all while we're cheering on his mother. And then he does it again, a second time, and my son and I were kind of just again in awe, because here we are in Hoboken, in a city, and this raptor, who connects to dinosaurs millions of years, is making a living and devouring these creatures. Right? We didn't have to go out of Hoboken to see this, and from there it was just pure love. I went and I got a book that had the pictures of the birds on one side, and then a remote control with the sounds on the other. And picked them up from school, I think the following Tuesday, with the book. And we step outside our front door, and there's a bird right at a tree, and we start thumbing through it. We have no idea what it's called, and there it is, on page 38. We play the sound. It's making the same sound. It turns out it was a European starling, a very common bird that we see all over our city. And we just fell in love with that. And from there, it just kept rolling along. Wow.
So we have Eric Hammer, who's a regular listener. He says, lots of food in Hoboken. So yes, that's true.
That's true.
Yeah, lots of birds and lots of food.
Totally.
So, I think it's pretty cool that, it's like you had that eureka moment that really sparked things. And, that was 2 birds, so are you up to a certain number of species? And then I'll ask, do you keep a diary of these?
That's great. So birders, many birders keep what's called a life list. So a life list is how many species you see over the course of your life. And so but birders love lists in general, okay? So for me personally, I have my life list, and every time I see a new species, whether it's in Hoboken, New York City, in Maine, I write that down. I note the day, I note who I'm with, and what happened. But then I have something called a backyard list and a Hoboken list. And I think my Hoboken list brings me even more joy. They all bring me joy, but when I discover a bird in our city or an animal, and we could actually go to the next slide, I'm overwhelmed. So,
whoa!
Before I talk about this, how many birds do you think I have seen in Hoboken? What do you think I'm up to?
I really have no idea.
Okay.
I don't even want to try.
If anybody wants to, send in or something like that, how many birds do you think I've seen currently in Hoboken?
I'll just do it. 75. 75.
All right. You overreached a little,
okay.
But we're about to hit 70.
Wow.
Yeah. Over the last 5 or 6 years.
Well, you may see 5 right here in the museum tonight.
That's it.
There you go. Let's break that record.
That's great. This bird, this is not a bird. There is a bird called a fox sparrow, but one of the delights about going around Hoboken is that I've discovered lots and lots of nature. And again, you don't have to, and I think a lot of people believe that in order to go to nature, you need to drive an hour and a half out of this city and go hiking, and that's really not true. And so 2 Saturdays ago, I got up a little early and I went out to a spot to see maybe a few fall migrants. It was the fall migration. And I'm leaning over, and what do I see? This fox who looked exactly like my dog lying in the sun, and I totally surprised him. And you can tell this picture is taken with my cell phone, so I'm very close to him.
Sure.
He was just looking at me. We stared at each other, and I knew I don't always take photos of the creatures that I see. I like to just immerse myself in the moment. But I thought of this conversation. I said, this will be a perfect way to kind of show people that there's nature here, right? This is an incredible mammal. And I have a line that I like to share with people, when you wonder, you discover. So simply by, keeping your head up, looking around, you're always going to see something new with nature.
So you don't have to give an exact location, but whereabouts is this?
Sure. So this happened to be on somewhere on the Stevens campus.
Okay.
And I was in the background. I'm able to see runners who are actually doing the Hoboken 5K at the time.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
And will you return to look for this fox, or do you not tracking, but
sure. I'm always curious, so I'm always wondering what's around the corner. In Hoboken, I've seen enough surprises now that every time I step out the door, I never know what's going to be found, right? And so, absolutely, every time I go to this spot, I'm always kind of peeking. Can I find him? Is he here somewhere? And inevitably, he might not turn up, but I went back there on we're Thursday right now. I went there Tuesday with my son, and pretty much in the same spot was a red-tailed hawk.
There you go.
Just perched, hanging out.
Gotcha. And so Jean-Paul Picard is saying Stevens has rabbits.
They sure do. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And those rabbits procreate.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Where there's one, there's many.
And that brings in the birds and the foxes, right?
Sure.
So everything's connected.
Right. John Paul's a regular birder, along with his wife Mary, and I see them every day.
Oh, wonderful!
And they stop by the museum and kind of report what they've seen.
Oh, that's great.
So they're the same. I told them we'd be talking tonight, so they tuned in.
Happy to have you here. We got to go birding.
Oh wow! So do you do it with a few people, or is it more solitary, or with your son?
So. Yes to all, right? Mm-hmm. So I am always doing it. Whenever I'm walking around, I went out for a haircut today, and I'm carrying my binoculars because you never know. But I love taking people out. So when I fall in love with something, it's by extension I need to teach it. Right? It's who I am as a person. And so if someone expresses, "Hey, I would love to go birding," and in fact, people can certainly reach out to me. I am leading, walks around town and in other places, but always, if someone expresses that curiosity, my goal is really kind of the birds, nature, kind of, they're like the steel, and I try to be the flint to kind of create those sparks, right? So, and that's what I love about it. Taking families out. I've done walks with the Hoboken Library. The kids are out there, but then the parents as well, or the caretakers, they're amazed because I can't believe I've walked down this street and never noticed, these nests, this foraging, this action. And so those sparks, people continue to see new things, which is wonderful.
Right. And I'm always amazed, like if you get up really early, 4:30, 5 o'clock, complete dark, town's pretty quiet.
Yes.
But it can be pretty noisy just from the birds.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Gorgeous.
Right. And do you know, can you make the bird sounds? Like you said, you can recognize them, but
Sure.
do you specialize? And I'm putting you on the spot
Yes.
here, but is there a bird sound that you like to make?
Oh, you want me to do a bird sound?
I do.
So my son makes fun of me for this. He thinks my barn owl call is not as good as I think it is, but I'll give you that right now. So
Okay. Pretty good.
There's my
Pretty
owl
good.
call. And the mourning dove, and this is one actually I teach to a lot of people. I think anyone can do it, but a lot of times people will say to me, Jeff, Mr. Train, we heard an owl this morning, and it's usually around 7 o'clock in the morning, maybe in the spring, and I said, does it sound like this? And that's the
mourning dove.
The mourning dove,
Yeah,
right?
I would know. I would
there
know
you go.
that. There you go. So, I mean, what I also like about this is that people, you know Hoboken after a while, you know the streets, you know the sidewalk, you know the built environment, the architecture,
Yep.
but it's kind of stationary. And something like birding is like there's an element of surprise.
Totally. And so what my son and I have discovered is that the places where we have birding incidents, where we discover Hoboken birds, almost become sacred, right? And that's why I love my Hoboken list just as much, if not more, as my life list. If we want to click on the next slide, I can give you 2 examples of what I mean by that. So this is not my photo. This is a photo that I got permission to use. And this is a bird called a Virginia rail. So very rare, very secretive bird, kind of hangs out in marshes, kind of like the meadowlands.
Sure.
One morning, last spring, I believe it was late February, early March, I am coming out of my car, going into my garage, and I get in. As I'm walking to my car, I see a bird under a car, and I know enough now the shapes of the common birds, the house sparrows, that this bird just looked funky. And at first, many times, it could be a boulder, something like that. So I get in my car and I'm watching it. I pull out and I go, that is a bird. And I stop my car, I get out, and sure enough, it's this Virginia rail, which, maybe was on its way from Florida to the Meadowlands and had just missed it a little bit, and he was just exhausted, kind of hanging out under a car. Always in that moment, I'm terrified for the bird, but this is kind of like a life lesson. These birds, know how to get to where they need to go, and they store up that energy. And by the end of the day, there was actually a Virginia rail being reported in Secaucus, and it was there for a few days. And so there's a perfect example. Every time I'm in that spot now, right, on 4th Street, I am connected to this Virginia rail, right, who was there with me in that space of time. Just amazing.
Just as a memory piece.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, right. Totally. So by writing down these birds, they kind of get locked here, and, this is now my Hoboken story, right?
Right, sure. So I just have this image of your son sort of translating this to kids that he knows.
Sure.
And that must be fun to overhear that as the father, like something you're passing down to him.
Totally. He got his spark a little later than I. He was really into birds with me, and that when we saw that red-tailed hawk, and it was a couple years later where he did something called the World Series of Birding, where he totally fell head over heels in love with birds. And now, he'll be on the playground at a park, and, kids are running around, and there's a hawk. They'll go to him to, what's the ID? What can you tell me? And then it does give me great delight when I come home and I hear, I saw a scarlet tanager today in the tree, it's cool because I trust him. He in many ways he's become a better birder than I am, and so it's just wonderful to kind of see us connecting through nature, and that's what I try to do for other families as well. I think a lot of people have stories like this. If you're out there and you have seen a bird in Hoboken, birds make people present in some ways, right? We talked about this a little bit. And by having that presence through this creature, we connect with each other and we connect with the spaces around us.
Sure. Not sure if you're prepared to answer this, but what do you do if you see an injured bird?
Oh, that's a great question. So first, here's kind of like a rule of thumb. If it's assuming it's like nesting season, so spring, if the bird is really ugly, you can help it. By that I mean, if it's a bird that's naked and doesn't have any feathers, that's a bird that's probably fallen out of a nest, like a house sparrow or a robin. The first thing to do is you can certainly pick it up, because it's a myth that if the bird smells human scent on us, they're not going to return to it. It's not true. Always try to find the nest and kind of put it back into the nest if the bird is kind of helpless in that way. If the bird does have some feathers and you can't find the nest and it's flapping, what I'll do is generally kind of put it under a bush, right? Because if it's just out on the sidewalk, baking in the sun, dogs walking by, that can be a problem.
Sure.
But just last summer, I had a house sparrow. They were nesting, above my door. I couldn't get to the nest. The bird had some wings on the outside feathers, but it was kind of naked inside. And we just had a planter in front of our door. I took the bird, put it in there, and it lived there for about 4 or 5 days, and the parents were there feeding it. And again, that's a great example of, a moment like that, you're actually supporting, helping, loving. My son was a part of that, and then, developing empathy, and then that amazing joy at seeing that bird kind of fly away. If the bird is not ugly, so if the bird's really cute, like a baby goose, for instance, right? If we see a lot of those in spring, they don't need our help. They're ready to go. They get out of the egg and they'll hop into the water, and their parents know how to tend to them. Occasionally, and I can give you an example in a couple slides actually of a bird that we did help. There's a great place called the Raptor Trust.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
It's down in Madison, New Jersey. It's world renowned, and for birds that have broken wings, things like that, that's an amazing place to take the bird. And if you go to the Raptor Trust website, if you have a bird like that, they kind of walk you through how to get the bird to them. And I'll tell you a story of some kestrels that we saved in a little bit with the Raptor Trust.
Okay, and that would be big birds too.
Oh yeah. A little bit smaller than this osprey here.
Right. Okay.
I do have another fun bird for Hoboken.
Go for it.
Is that cool?
Yeah.
So here's another example. My son and I are playing at the park. We're playing football with one of his friends, and he goes, "Daddy, is that a chicken on the basketball court at Church Square Park?" And at first I was like, no way. And I look over, and sure enough, there is a grouse running around on the basketball court. So he's either really athletic and wants to play. Yes, absolutely. We have no clue, right? So this animal doesn't talk. This was a case where I debated, is this a migrant? I didn't think so. But Odie and I, we actually took this bird, brought him back, and we were actually going to an event the next day with kind of ornithologists, and so we decided to bring him to the event. And they didn't really have the theories now are that maybe someone was raising birds like this in the area to eat, or maybe there was a truck going and the bird jumped out, but this bird made it in Hoboken. So.
Wow. Have you ever heard of the book called The Chicken Emergency?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It reminded me totally.
Yes, definitely. Could have been part of the book.
The
sequel. Okay, great. Do you want to go to the next slide? It may spark some interest.
Oh, sure.
It's a little pixelated, but we get the sense.
So I can tell people with this one here, this is a spot on the north side of Hoboken near those piers, and I'll go for a jog, and this bird nests just about every year, right? And it's always amazing to me that people walk by and have no clue, and just by stopping and examining and looking, you get to see life, right? And this particular image, I believe, came from the reason it's so grainy. It was in the middle of the pandemic, when I went out for a jog on my own, and I think a lot of people had this experience, that interacting with life at that time really kind of gave us an opportunity to be grateful, to take a moment, and to not have to live in all of that stress all the time.
Sure. But if you get too close...
Sure, absolutely. And so the good thing about this particular one is that there is like a barrier. And so people... so I am not very close to this. I am, behind the barrier, zoomed in, and just got a good photo at that day. But totally, you want to be very careful with nests. One of the things that we could do as humans is alert a bird of prey to a nest. So if we are hanging around, not only do we stress the animals out, but I could tell a peregrine falcon. So anytime I do see a nest, it's a quick look, and then I'm on my way, because I don't want to be responsible for...
Sure, and nesting season would be like March, April?
Yeah, so owls, believe it or not, and actually mourning doves. I saw a mourning dove nesting. She had 11 broods this season, and she started back in February. And that can go all the way from February, and then the songbirds, and even goldfinches into late September. So it's quite a long ways. And every season is just unbelievable. I get really sad this time of year as the songbirds head out, but we're also welcoming new neighbors to Hoboken, right? So, we're going to be getting our buffleheads soon, who hang out in the water. Our brants are going to be here with the Canada geese. And so it's just what birding allows you to do, really kind of gives you a lens into all of nature.
And seasons
cycles.
too. Right?
Absolutely.
Seasons, right.
Absolutely.
I think of driving down Sinatra Drive, and everyone drives kind of fast.
Yep.
But for some reason, there's no light, there's no reason to really stop, and then you see this parade of goslings going across down by Sybil's Cave area.
Yes.
And it's pretty amazing.
Yes.
Because if there's one geese, I'm probably saying it wrong, but if there's one bird, there's probably 7 birds.
Sure.
And they all have their family.
Yes.
It's pretty cool.
Yes, and it is amazing that people go very fast, but they'll stop for the birds. They'll stop for the family.
Definitely,
which
definitely.
Is always really brings a smile to my face.
That's true.
Yes.
We got Ellen Frey. Do you have bird feeders? Do you feed the birds?
Great question. So I will say this, public service announcement. This morning I was, jogging on the pier and I saw someone feeding bread to the birds. And in general, we don't want to feed the water birds, the waterfowl. They don't need it, and actually bread is really bad for them. Just like we shouldn't eat too much bread, they can get a condition called angel wing, which their wings will grow too fast, and basically they'll peck at the wing, and it won't grow back. And so there's one bird I've become fond of. Her name is Starlight, who's a Canada goose who lives in Closter at the Nature Center, and she has angel wing, and it's really sad because she's never accepted by the other Canada geese, and she's kind of isolated. And so remember, Starlight, don't feed birds bread. If you must feed waterfowl, frozen peas or corn is really great, right? Frozen because it doesn't have the salt that canned has, and that's more of a green vegetable that's going to give them the sustenance they need. Certainly in the wintertime, this time of year, heading into late fall, winter, bird feeding with seeds, if you have a backyard, it's one of the great joys. You're going to get a lot of really cool stuff, everything from cardinals and blue jays and downy woodpeckers. I'm lucky enough to have someone behind my backyard, who actually has a bird feeder, and so we get a lot of cool birds in there. All the birds I just mentioned are actually showing up. And sometimes we'll take something called bark butter and put it on the tree out front. It's kind of almost like a peanut butter for birds, and they make it with a hot pepper, and so squirrels won't eat it, which is nice. And so it's absolutely a great way to kind of get introduced into birds and birding.
So, what about hummingbirds? If you put out a bird feeder, those cylinders with the liquid in it, would you attract hummingbirds?
Absolutely. So we do have a hummingbird feeder at my house. We have planted a lot of native flowers too to kind of pull them in. Haven't gotten one yet ourselves, but someone has told me that they've seen a hummingbird in Hoboken. So that's on our Hoboken. We're hoping to get that on our Hoboken list one day.
And where there's one, there's bunches.
Totally,
yeah,
totally.
I've seen
absolutely.
them.
Yes.
More in northwest New Jersey, and they're really fun to watch.
Gorgeous. Have you ever seen one in Hoboken?
No, I don't think so. All
right.
I was getting confused with butterflies and butterfly bushes.
Yes.
Not that I should be confused, but I've seen butterfly bushes and a lot of butterflies down by Pier A, but not a hummingbird.
Maybe Stevens at some point, might get some action there.
Sure.
And if people have gardens with native flowers, that's wonderful. Something also to think about. So my neighbor who has this feeder, once you have a bird feeder, you're also creating another feeder for a bird like a Cooper's hawk, which I have that in 2 slides. I'll
which
show
are
you.
big.
Yes.
Eric is chiming in. Is the Hudson water quality around Hoboken good for the water birds?
So that's a great question. One of the ways that Odie and I got into birding and nature was by exploring the water with a program. Her name is Noelle from the kayaking. And that was so eye-opening for us because what we learned down there was absolutely the water quality in the Hudson is improving each and every year. We would go down there and set a trap, and she introduced us to things like oyster toad fish, and then we would go across the Hudson to New York City, where they have a wet lab, and everything from seahorses. They're putting more oysters back in. And just a couple of years ago, there was a whale who came up the Hudson. We had a seal that showed up by the Hudson Tea building. Maybe some of you saw that. All of these are signs that the water quality is, getting better and improving, which is wonderful.
Right. I think they say the water quality of the Hudson River in this area, the lower Hudson, is the best it's been in 100 years.
Yep.
Industry is more restrictive
Yep.
about dumping.
Yep.
And that's even created some problems in a way, because you have the borers, which are
Yes.
worms, and if you have old wooden piers,
Yep.
even concrete piers, they will start to munch on them.
Absolutely.
Because they're very sensitive to pollutants and would die, but they are flourishing.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
all interesting how it works.
Totally. The ecosystem. And that really also connects us to the city as well, right? All those projects that were done.
Sure.
The soccer field being, shut down for those years. Nature is all around us. It's living with us, and I think allowing ourselves to feel more connected with it.
Sure. So I'm going to, wow, tell me about this image. I got to look.
All right,
Yeah.
so this is I would call it, so the red-tailed hawk is my first spark bird, and this is my second spark bird. And this is, my son named this bird Dawn. So one day, this is a little farther up north on the Palisades.
I was going to say, we're not in Hoboken.
We're not in Hoboken. I don't think we're in Hoboken anymore, Toto. And so this is in Closter, New Jersey. I teach in northern New Jersey, back to school night. I have a couple hours to kill. I say to my friend, do you want to go bird? Sure. We'll just be gone for an hour. And lo and behold, this bird comes hurtling out of the sky at us, and we have to help it. So I ran back to my car. You can tell in the picture here, I'm wearing a pair of slacks on my arm to protect myself. I guess I'm not wearing those at back to school night. We pick up the hawk, and now we have picked up a hawk, and I have a clock running to get back to school night. So we get in the car, we're racing
Show
down.
and tell. Show and tell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was reading Harry Potter with my son at the time, so I thought, maybe they would like it if I show up with a cage and a raptor. So we go to a pet shop that's right near our school, and we get them to give us a cage, and we're debating what to do, and one of the owners tells me that there's actually another center, a hospital, that takes wounded birds. So we brought the bird there. Unfortunately, after about a week, the bird, Dawn, passed away, and it turned out that she either had lead poisoning or West Nile virus. They kind of act the same way with those. And so I had just read an article at the time that basically a third of all birds on the planet had been wiped out since the 1970s. So something like, I believe, like 7 billion birds had just disappeared due to just, so many paper cuts, right? So window strikes, cats, pesticides, all of these problems that humans are kind of creating for birds. And when I saw this bird, it was, I have to help. I have to do something, rather than someone else will do it. And I say it's kind of my second spark bird because since that time, when a problem shows itself, my family and I, it's very important to us, how can we do something? How can we help? And so I think that's a great lesson, and it definitely comes from connecting with, nature, being a part of it, loving it, having a passion for it, and continuing to kind of celebrate it.
But I like how you make it a family thing, because it's actually probably a lot of pressure. How do I help this bird? And to talk it out, and family problem solving is good life lessons and kind of cathartic. And,
that's true.
And so pretty cool. So this is you in the photo, right?
This is me.
Okay,
yep.
With the hat and the newer glasses. I just wanted to be sure.
I guess this is the Mr. Train origin story.
Okay, there you go. And the rest is history. Hoboken.
This is Hoboken. So this is
Red tail?
Cooper's hawk.
A Cooper's hawk,
yep.
which are kind of like, give people an idea of the size. I mean, I
So
guess it could be a young Cooper's hawk, but these things can get big.
Absolutely. So a red-tailed hawk is called a buteo, and a Cooper's hawk and a sharp-shinned hawk are called accipiters, right? And these birds, the accipiters, are designed for sprints, whereas red-tailed hawks are designed for being able to do a little bit more soaring from above. This bird is going to go in and out of bushes and pick off a bird, something like that. And so I would say, probably maybe like really bad with numbers, but maybe 2.5 feet long, right? And just gorgeous birds who are, again, kind of living all around us, right? And one of the things that I'm very protective of them is rodents. If people put out poisons,
sure,
these birds really suffer because they'll ingest the poison as well. And so I'm always keeping an eye on them, looking out on their behalf.
And I've observed a few of these birds, but I don't know if it was a Cooper's hawk or a red-tailed hawk.
Yep.
But I have this image of them being up high,
Yep.
and watching.
Yes.
And their heads are kind of like they're very still, except their heads kind of rotate.
Yeah.
And they're almost like robotic, waiting for that moment.
Oh, yeah.
And then swooping down.
Totally.
And it's kind of amazing to watch. It's almost, they're going to go for food.
Yep.
But it's like watching like a pickpocket a person or watching a crime unfold. Probably not the best analogy, but you're just transfixed by watching this living thing plot its next meal.
Absolutely. National Geographic, right?
Definitely.
In our backyard. And everything that you said is correct. One of my goals is to see, I want to see a peregrine falcon or a kestrel grab a pigeon. That's one of the reasons why they are, hanging out in our city, is because there are so many pigeons, right? I have not seen it yet. I've seen a Cooper's on a pigeon in my backyard, and as soon as he saw me, flew off with the bird. But it's kind of the drama of life, death, and we get to watch it and be a part of it. And when you get tuned into it, I never want to walk around the city, with my hand in my phone, my head in my phone, because what am I going to miss, right? What's happening out there? Who's going to show up? I would also tell people, absolutely, when you're walking around, one of the things that I'm doing, when you're crossing a street, we're looking both ways, right? We want to be safe there. But when you're Church Square Park, if you look up to the top of the church on the spire, there's always a great chance you're going to see a kestrel, a Cooper's, a peregrine falcon.
Right. Wow. It's actually pretty exciting.
Yeah.
And you're
totally
conveying that. So look
grateful.
At that color.
So this is not my photo, but yes, this is a bird that took my breath away. So here's an example. I dropped my son off at baseball, and he had a game. I had an hour, to bird, and I walked up onto the Stevens campus and didn't know what I was going to find. It was in the heart of the spring migration, so one of the best days to bird all year. And although I should say every day is the best day to bird, right? But I'm walking by the dumpsters, in a place that you wouldn't expect to see anything, and I look over and I see that beautiful indigo bunting. And first and only time that a bird has actually taken my breath away, right? Where I would not expect to see it. We had this moment probably 15 feet away. He watched me, I watched him, and who knows how long he was there in our city, but he was there for, a few seconds, gassing up before he moved on to breeding grounds. And again, just brings you wholly present in that moment.
So generally, if you see a bird like this, are you looking for another bird? I mean, do they hang together like a couple, and are they the same coloring,
Sure.
male and female? Or
So the indigo buntings, the male and the females are a little bit different. The indigo bunting female is a little like browner, almost like the color of a mourning dove. They will migrate in groups, flocks, sometimes based upon winds, disorientation, maybe a light at night, something. A bird just gets, lost and ends up, it could be completely alone. Of course, as soon as I saw this bird, I was, and he flew away, what else is around there? And generally, you find that birds are together, right? Because one of the things that you'll fall in love with when you fall in love with birds is also trees, because trees feed the birds, right? And so whether they house insects or seeds. And so another story that I like to tell is I have seen many Baltimore Orioles in Hoboken, but there's one that I care about. The one that I really prize was over by the light rail. And, there's a swampy area back on the southwest side, gorgeous area. It's right by the bike path. And one spring, an oriole came in, was whistling. Anytime this happens, by the way, I have to stop people. And so whether you're biking or jogging, if it's you, I have to let you know there's an oriole whistling. And the following, about 2 months after I saw this bird, they cut the tree down for whatever reason. And it was devastating, right? Because that tree is what that bird needed to be in our city. And so, I think it's the valuable lesson there is, take that sadness. Every tree that we plant is significant. We want to think about, planting native species and really protecting as many birds as we can so that we have more here.
Very cool. Whoa.
So this is Thunder, I believe. I think I have a picture of Thunder and then his sibling Lightning. And what I can tell you, this kind of relates to the second Spark story. So this is a type of falcon. It's North America's smallest falcon. We have a bunch in Hoboken, and year after year, I'm able to find their nests. They kind of nest in kind of like the starlings. They'll make little holes. They'll get into holes in people's rafters. A lot of the cornices they'll make their way in, and
those cornices make great nests too, because they're older wood.
Yep.
And they're just, you can see the straw and all the light material.
Totally
makes a great nest.
Absolutely.
And they get in and out there.
Yeah, and nothing else is getting in there.
No,
right?
Exactly.
And so at the time I knew that, these birds, there was a nest going on. We are making our way to up Hoboken to actually go to a march, actually. And we're walking up, and my son said, and so many stories, by the way, I'm discovering begin with, "Daddy, is that a blank?" And, is that a kestrel on the tire of a car? And I should look over, and sure enough, it's a baby kestrel. He really doesn't have a lot of feathers underneath his wings at this point, and really, really tiny, as you can see in my hand. He hops up into the well of the car, and, so I grabbed him, and it's middle of the day. I don't see a nest anywhere, and we're now walking up Washington, and a stream of people are coming towards us, and it's really, really hot. And as we are continuing towards where I think the nest is, I hear, "Oh, look, there's another one." And it's somebody at East LA. Between the sandwich boards of the sign is the sibling of this bird. If you want to go to the next slide. And so they gave us a box, and I just so happened to have recently emailed a kestrel expert who works at Montclair. And so I sent him a quick email, and he happened to be looking at his, computer. He was in from the field, and we spoke on the phone, and we kind of took some measurements, and these birds should not have been out of the nest. It was too early for them. So they weren't looking good. It was very hot. They had been out for how many hours. No idea what happened, whether, another bird got into the nest, whether, maybe some construction, they sent them flying. But we gave them some food, some chicken with, a little medicine dropper, a little bit of water, and they took a nap. We got them down to Madison, and these birds were then released. And we don't know where they were released, but anytime we look up and we see a kestrel flying by, it gives us great joy to think that it's thunder and lightning.
It could be them. It could be brother or sister.
Absolutely.
That's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
And what was the march? You said
so it was a Black Lives Matter march.
I assume that because
yes.
that's sort of been the march that kind of sticks in your mind.
Yes.
An incredible day in
Absolutely,
Hoboken.
yes.
And to think that you not sidetracked, but that you could participate in both things must have been pretty special.
Absolutely, yep. And as it was happening, we were talking. Odie and I were talking about it, and the important thing was that we were acting, right? We were helping these creatures,
right?
And so.
But probably, what do I do? Do I go on the march, or
Yep.
do I help the bird, or do I do both?
Yes.
So kind of cool.
Absolutely.
Kinda cool.
Thankfully, the march actually came close to our house, and so while the birds were napping, we were able to go out and kind of do both.
Okay, very serendipitous. So you go by the name of Mr. Train.
Yes.
And you have a character.
Yes.
And you want to talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So I will say, before the show, Rand was talking to me, he said, "What's this bird's name?" And I think I'm going to have a contest at some point, because we got to figure out this bird's name. I shout out to Mike Blaskowitz, who's a Hoboken resident, amazing artist. He, created this image, and I just love it so much, and other people do. So basically, around the pandemic, I had started reaching out to the city of Hoboken, the library. I was going to do something called Fledglings, the Hoboken Fledglings, which was basically doing what we're doing right now for kids. Take kids out, talk to them about birds, show them the joy, get them excited. And of course, the pandemic hit, and we had to stop that idea. And so I was sitting around, and I got on Prezi, which was a tool I was learning so I could teach, and started making a presentation of just, hey, by looking at your window, here are some birds that you can see: the house sparrow, the mourning dove. I did the sounds, things like that. And it was really just me kind of teaching the way I am. And what happened was people got encouraged by it, they enjoyed it, and slowly but surely I started, doing more recordings, and that created this character who's Mr. Train, who's very, very close to who I am as a teacher, and kind of the person that I am just here with you today, kind of sharing my passion. And
but this is you. I mean, it's got the hat, it's got the glasses.
He's got a great fashion sense.
There you go.
Yes.
And green, blue, whatever. But it seems I have a Woody Woodpecker feel, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Yep.
So on there.
For the species.
Yes.
Yes.
And so these people aren't Zooming right now, but
No.
they're on the screen. I guess you want to say hi to them?
Well,
or?
not the greatest picture. I guess Taiki's eyes are closed, and I am kind of looking down. But so the three people here, this is me, Taiki James, and David Fankhauser, who's a freedom rider. So along with the second spark of acting, one of the things that came out of 2020 as well was, I had birded with Chris Cooper in Central Park, and I began attending Black Birders meetings. Taiki was one of the blanking on the word, the moderators for a Black Birder discussion. And through one of his conversations, I reached out to him, and we've been talking now pretty much every Tuesday at 5:30, every other Tuesday. And together we've created a project called Freedom Birders. There were the Freedom Riders, who David was. And for those of you who don't know who the Freedom Riders were, basically they would, black people, white people, fought segregation by getting on buses and traveling from the north to the south, which was, quote unquote illegal, and they thought that was wrong, and risked their lives. And
So this is the Civil Rights Initiative, 1960s,
Absolutely.
Freedom of Voting Act,
absolutely,
and things like that.
Absolutely.
So help me, though. How are we connecting that to birding?
Great question. So first and foremost, one of the conversations that prompted the idea of freedom riders was freedom birders, no-go zones. So, there are many people who go birding, and for instance, one person said, a lot of people go down to Texas to bird, for instance. And as Christian Cooper said, as a black gay man, he didn't feel like he could go birding in Texas, right? And so the thought was, well, if there were the freedom riders, what if the freedom birders, got a whole bunch of birders together and together, went birding? And what's through basically connections to influences from Black Lives Movement, from the 1619 Project, Taiki and I have really kind of started exploring, and many more people have started kind of exploring the connections and the intersections between land, people, history, and then through all of that as well are birds, right? And so by kind of engaging with people, history, land, as we're going out, and also bird, one of the things we want to do is actually do a freedom birding tour, which actually traces the route of the freedom riders and kind of explore and tell those stories, learn, and as well as bird.
Wow. I mean, that's taken it pretty far. I mean, it's amazing. I never would have thought about that.
Thank you.
So thanks for bringing that awareness, for sure.
Of course.
It's wow, mind-boggling.
If you're interested in learning more about the project, you can definitely check out freedombirders.org and, check out some videos and things.
So birding has taken you down a lot of paths.
Yes.
And it must be so interesting, the people you meet. Not only the birds you see,
Yep.
but these conversations.
Totally.
Are probably, have really opened up a lot of avenues.
Absolutely.
A lot of dialogue.
I talk about something called beginner-minded, right? Where you always want to be open to learning and seeing new things. And it's totally reinforced this, that I never have any idea what I'm going to learn, who I'm going to meet, and so it kind of gives you this just ability to just cultivate this, what's out there today.
Right. But birds are kind of the portal.
Yes.
So that's interesting.
Yes, absolutely.
So very sad to see a dead bird.
Yes. So this is a black-throated blue warbler. One of the tells, if you look on the wing, it's called a white handkerchief. That's one of the ways you can tell this bird. I actually saw this bird. This is on our Hoboken life list. Not this particular bird, but I saw that bird in May in the snow. It snowed on a day in May here in Hoboken.
Yeah.
There I was by the Hudson Tea building, and this bird was, cleaning some insects.
Wow.
This sad bird was making his way south, maybe to Central America, and hit a window. And a lot of people I've spoken to in Hoboken, window strikes happen. Really, really sad. More than 1 billion birds per year will die because of window strikes.
Wow.
And that's really sad. And one of the things that I would love for people to do is you can go to dbird.org, D as in dead, bird.org, and you can actually log a bird on there. If you don't know what it is, you can always, that's okay. You can just put unknown species. You can also reach out to me anytime. I'll show you how later. But by logging those, it kind of gives us a glimpse as to where the problem areas are, and we can then begin to kind of change that. And so
Sure. So someone just starting out, I see you have a pair of binoculars there. I mean, do you have to spend a lot of money to get going on this?
Great question.
What do you recommend?
So first, you don't need anything to bird. I think that's one of the most amazing things about it. You can go outside and just look, and you're going to start to see stuff and be amazed. I do believe that binoculars, though, take it to such a different level, right? It kind of gives you that close-up view to see. I mean, you can see in this photo, that photo there, the details of the individual feathers are just pretty amazing. It's just like any other hobby. You can, get in at the entry level, and then you can go spend as much money, as anybody has. But by all means, you don't need to spend a lot of money to bird, and that's another thing that I love about it, that it's, everybody can do it. And so, I have a great pair that I use with my students. I think it cost me, $35, a pair of Bushnells that work great. And then, for my own personal birding, I have a pair of binoculars that I spend a little bit more money on. And the beautiful thing is, as you grow, as you kind of improve, your eye starts to, notice things. I remember when I got my first pair of binoculars, I actually looked at a really expensive pair and said, I don't see the difference between these two.
Interesting.
And then when I got better, I said, oh, now I see the difference.
And I guess you want it to fit well in your hand. You don't want it to be too heavy.
Sure.
Because just make it easy.
Absolutely. The other thing that I would suggest people get is a field guide, which is a book that has pretty much all the species in North America. So some do east, some do west, some do the entirety. A great example of the Sibley Field Guide East is phenomenal. David Sibley is an artist who draws all the birds. Another one is the National Geographic Guide to Birds. I love both of those books. They've really taken me a long way, and they're great for kids too. Just leaving my field guides out, my son, his friends, they'll kind of just flip through and they learn so much, and teach me a lot as well, because you don't read every page and oh, did you know the name of this bird is XYZ, or did you look at the range for this bird and know that it comes from here?
Sure.
So there's just endless.
I think I remember seeing this one book that was really thick, and it might have been put out by Cornell, and you could actually push a button and it would make the bird signs. Beautifully designed.
Yes.
A lot of fun.
Gorgeous.
A lot of fun.
Yes.
So.
That was the bird book that my son and I started with. Yep.
Okay, cool. So a couple other things, like we see Canadian geese all the time now, like they don't migrate. Or do they? I mean, it seems like in February on Pier A.
Yeah.
So what's the deal there?
So over the last 30 or so years, birds do change their migratory patterns. Another bird like the black vulture you didn't see around here very much, maybe 30 years ago, but now we're seeing them. Ravens as well. Canada geese, it's just they have so much food here. They've figured out how to make a living, and by and large, most Canada geese, their patterns have changed here, and they're with us pretty much all year long. I have read essays by birders who are older than I am, who've said they remember being children and hearing the Canada geese return, and now they
Right. I think I remember that.
Yeah.
And then they got protected and so on. And like you said, it's warmer, there's a lot of food here, so why go to Florida?
Right.
Yeah. And then people always joke about, the most common bird you see in the city is probably pigeons. And you never see a nest with pigeon eggs. And so where are they? Where are they nesting, and how come we don't see that nest?
Very secretive birds when it comes to nesting. They're very family oriented, right? So they'll mate for life, and they are pretty much nesting all year long. Those birds, they can nest all year long, and they'll do it in a spot where we don't get to see those nests. I think I've seen one nest from a pigeon. I do not think I've ever seen an actual pigeon fledgling.
Same here. Bird. You see the nests up high, but I've never seen eggs.
No.
And never seen the little guys and gals.
I just finished reading a book called the by the artist who's actually on my next slide, actually.
Okay. We'll just get Eric in here. I have seen birds hitching a ride on the ferry, especially sparrows. So,
yes.
Okay. They saved that $9.50.
Yes. Another way of migrating.
Yeah.
So what I was saying was, I just finished reading the guide to pigeon watching, which is another great intro, and it's like a field guide to just pigeons by this artist Rosemary Moscow, who's judging a rock dove art contest. And one of the details she put in the book was that one of the reasons why we don't eat pigeon is because they're so protective of their fledglings, and it takes so much for them to feed their young, and they're so secretive about it that it just doesn't kind of it's not conducive to like mass production, right?
Okay.
So that kind of like saved them, I guess. In some
But
way.
there's like, isn't squab the same thing as pigeon?
Yes, but it's not. They haven't become chicken, right?
Okay.
Where it's just chicken now or mass produced.
Right.
In
And I know the kind of slur word for pigeons are winged rats.
Yes.
Which
Yes.
I kind of like.
So I am trying, along with Rosemary, right, to kind of reveal that this is an amazing bird, right? They mate for life, very family oriented, and they're just cool, right? If you think about that bird, you can kind of drive it, hundreds of miles away, spin it around, and let it go, and it's going to, hone right back into Hoboken. And again, this is a perfect bird, right? That this shares our community with us. These rock doves. And that's a great. And her book also introduced me to this idea, the connotation of a word, right? The referring to that bird as a rat, a winged rat. People are disgusted. But that bird is also a dove. It's in the dove family. And what do we think of when we think of a dove? We think of peace, right? And so certainly I, from this book, have really started kind of paying more attention to this beautiful bird. And the only reason we kind of associate it with kind of grit and dirtiness is because a lot of people will feed it, and make it kind of feral in that way, right? And so by us changing our behavior and kind of appreciating it, we can kind of see that beauty. And so the Rock Dove Art Contest is for anyone, kids, teenagers, adults. If you're interested in kind of getting to know this bird that you see every day and started paying attention to it, submit some artwork for it. You have an amazing artist who's judging, and we have some cool prizes too.
Okay. This, I think we're kind of winding down. This hour just flowed like
so sad.
unbelievable. Yeah. And I'll just say that I think you're really onto something, and your enthusiasm comes across. And I hope we can work together.
Absolutely.
In the new year. We've recently met, and this is pretty exciting. I mean, as I said, you sort of get to know Hoboken after a while, but you have introduced a whole new thing.
Oh, thank you.
So I think I'm inspired myself.
Awesome. Thank you for saying that.
It's all true. It's all true. I can't remember. Do we have more slides, or did we?
That was the last one.
That was the last slide.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to be segueing out. I want to thank you again. This has been a great hour, and I'm lucky to have done this interview. Just want to mention Hoboken Talks will be continuing, and next week we'll be out in the field. We're going to be getting a tour of the west side of Hoboken by Stu Cicciarello and Michael Turner. Rand will be out and about on the street, and then after that we'll do an interview of Kristen Cricco Powell. So I should mention that as we get into December, we'll be doing a show change at the museum, and so I believe the last day of the exhibit is December 22nd, 23rd, and we will be taking a break from Hoboken Talks during January and really just focusing on the exhibit installation. I want to thank Rand Hoppe for making this program professional. And we do thank different people who are supporters of the museum. A shout out to the the Kiernan family, and Mel Kiernan, who is deceased but included us in estate planning and was able to think kindly towards the museum. In addition, the New Jersey Historical Commission is one of our main general operating supporters, a great state agency that has supplied equipment to make this program better and helps us with so many different things. New Jersey Council for the Humanities, another state agency who is supporting our next exhibit, which will open in January. It's a shout out to them. And these are very special people who donate at a high level. Many of them are trustees or former trustees, and they make it all possible here at the museum. In addition, Iron State is our main corporate supporter. They are the ones who have, in a sense, granted us this space that we're so happy. And it's so funny, as I said Iron State, I had a flashback to a few weeks ago when a pigeon flew into the museum, and we did get him out. Sorry, I diverted there, but I got birding on my mind for sure. So thank you, Iron State. And again, the current exhibit is The Avenue, A History of Washington Street. It's still up till December, before the holidays, and we really hope you come visit before it comes down. We will be introducing a virtual exhibit, so you'll get a sense of it, but there's nothing like seeing the real thing, just like seeing the real birds of Hoboken, as opposed to seeing them on your phone. And then we're proud to continue exhibiting the still lifes of Deborah Paul. The exhibit has been extended till November 27th. Deborah's had a good run and does a great job creating these still lifes. So check that out in the upper gallery. And again, we love that you share and subscribe this program, make comments here on YouTube. It can be done, and we like to get more subscribers. It gets us more creds, shall we say, more social media hits and so on. And again, Hoboken Historical Museum is the sponsor of this program, and I believe we're up to about 94, 95 episodes, and this one can be viewed again if you came in late or want to share it with others. You can check it on YouTube. That's our main platform.